That was one of the biggest reasons why I started what I did is because I am an equestrian. I do still compete. I have built a lot of horse farms myself. So when it comes to marketing equestrian properties, I just have a wealth of information.
Welcome everyone to the Closing Table Podcast, real accounts from real estate professionals brought to you by Windowsill. I'm your host, Kat Schuler, and today I am sitting down with Kelly Martin. Kelly is the broker and owner of Homes and Farms Realty out in Jackson, Tennessee, and today we sit down and talk about all things equestrian and farm properties. We talk about how Kelly got into real estate and chose her niche in this area. We talk about how her love for horses and her competition equestrian background makes her the perfect person to help people buy and sell these properties. We talk about some of Kelly's most memorable listings and her giving spirit. And we also talk about how Kelly is leading her team and looking forward to the goals for 2025 with her team. So without further ado, let's chat with Kelly. Kelly, thank you so much for joining me today. I would love to start our conversation with some of your backstory, how you got into real estate, and then how you made your company a Home and Farms Realty.
Yeah, absolutely. First, thanks for having me on your show. It's super awesome that I got invited, and I'm very excited to be here today. So, as far as how I got into real estate and how I landed where I am, before I did real estate, I owned 6 or 7 restaurants where I was constantly working. I had like 120 employees, and it was just something that I wanted to get out of and switch over. So then we ended up selling everything, relocating to a completely different part of the country and reinventing myself. So I got into real estate, and quickly into real estate, I was like, I'm going to specialize in selling horse farms and luxury properties. And where I was in the region, people were like, that's really not a thing here. I'm like, we're in Tennessee. I really think it should be a thing. You think of Tennessee, you kind of think of cowboys and cowgirls. So I did end up specializing in it, and I was working for like a big franchise real estate company at the time. And so from there, I started Home and Farms as more of a team, where I was specializing in horse farms and also selling normal real estate stuff. And I hit the ground running with it because coming from owning restaurants on a national chain level, marketing I knew was a massive part of what I needed to do. So it was instantly buying. Back then it was like magazine ads and radio ads, and just started getting into like the Zillow ads and stuff like that before Zillow was Zillow, really. So we ventured into that. And then where I was in that part of the region, which is in southern Tennessee, I got my Georgia license. So then I was covering 2 areas. And then we ended up relocating to Mississippi. So I kept my Tennessee license, and I got my Mississippi license. And then we ended up moving to an area about 2 hours outside of Nashville and back into Tennessee. And that's where I decided to open up my own brokerage that specializes in selling horse farms. We do also do all the mountain houses, the lake houses, normal subdivision houses as well. And I got my broker license in Alabama. So I am a broker now in Tennessee, Georgia, Mississippi, and Alabama.
Wow, gosh, what a resume. And having that background in the restaurant business, I'm sure has given you so much resilience and know-how, because everybody knows that's a hard business to be in. And especially at your level, managing all of these different locations and all of those people, I'm sure it has just set you up for success to then, be in real estate where it's a little more curated. It's a little more small,
Yes. And the level of people that we work with is definitely more on a professional level. When you're working in the restaurant area, you deal with a lot of young people still in high school, college. they're temporary jobs for them. Here in my company, we help grow our agents. So we're very agent focused. So we help our agents launch their careers. We set them up with their own personal websites and their own CRMs, and we get together with them and we teach them how to market themselves and brand themselves within our company. So it's just a different level of people that we work with. We are working with people that want to have usually multi-million dollar careers and be super successful, and I work really hard to set them up for that.
I find it so interesting, going back to what you were saying before, that when you came to Tennessee, people were like, oh, horse farms, that's not really a niche here. Because for me, it makes sense.
Right.
I think it's so funny. We're based out of Michigan, and I live more in the southeastern part of Michigan, and there's a huge equestrian community here, which I find kind of surprising. But there's lots of land, so
There are huge equestrian communities all over the place. People don't even think about it. And I think, like, in general, the world thinks about Tennessee kind of similar to the way that you think about Texas, like that it's all cowboys and stuff. But when you're actually here, that's not so much the local vibe. Especially in the one area that I lived in was like the Chattanooga region. It was very much into like trail running, hiking, like just a different vibe than that. And that was the first area that I started Home and Farms. And like I said, we just expanded from there. So it's pretty cool.
And you're an equestrian yourself. So was that part of your impetus to focus on this niche?
Absolutely. So, drives me crazy when I see a horse farm listed with an agent who has no idea what they're talking about, has no idea how to speak the language. And that was one of the biggest reasons why I started what I did, is because I am an equestrian. I do still compete. When I was raising my children, they all competed in different disciplines. So we're very well versed, but I have built a lot of horse farms myself. So when it comes to marketing equestrian properties, I just have a wealth of information. I know how to market the property, from the different types of footing that people might use in the arena to the different sizes that people are looking for, the different types of fence, stall fronts, barns, indoor arena versus covered versus outdoor, size of stalls, land, all that stuff. I know how to speak it. And then I'm also in front of people. So I'm in front of people that at competitions, but on social media, we all follow each other. Like, I think it's the only thing. I think I have like somewhere between 7 and 8,000 people on Facebook. In the horse world, a lot of the people that I'm friends with that are in the horse world, I have never even met, but we have like 500 mutual friends, because it's just a world where we speak a different language, and we have different priorities as to what's important when we're looking at properties.
Yeah, and I would imagine that something like that is such a tight-knit community, large but tight-knit.
Yes, very much, because like a lot of people, when they're equestrians, their horses are their family. It's a hobby for them, but they pour everything into it. A lot of times, when somebody's looking for a property that is a horse property, and you have a regular real estate agent that's listing it, they might have 75 pictures up, and the first 50 pictures are the house. But a horse person always looks at the barn and the property before they even look at a house. And that's something that's really important when you're marketing a horse property, that first picture really states, hey, this is a horse property. And then your third picture is your most important picture. So it's usually the best feature that you want to show off as to what's going to drive somebody into that property.
Oh, that is a wonderful nugget of wisdom. I've never heard it like that. And I think that is really important to mention for these properties. Like, I know, when my personal opinion, if I were to look at a plain residential house, not a horse property, I really think if people are doing floor plans, my personal preference would be that the floor plan is like the second picture. It's like, let's see the outside of the house, and then I want to see the floor plan, and then I'll get into like the details. But I think it's so important that for your equestrian properties, like, that your prime, target wants to see the equestrian part of the property first.
Absolutely, because that is That is the most important thing. That's the thing that most people can't change. But the house you can change. So you can upgrade it. And most of the time the houses need to be upgraded because equestrians, like, they put everything into their barns. You walk into a horse person's barn, everything's going to have a place and it's going to be super neat, super clean. The aisles are blown, dusted. Like, it's, you walk in there and you're like, wow, this is amazing. And then you go into their house, half the time, maybe more than that, their house looks like an explosion happened. Like, it is, like, there's just everything's in there, all the clothes from their horse shows or wherever they are, and it's usually pretty typical. That's what a horse person's place looks like.
Oh, that is so interesting. So, do you find when you're working with clients who are looking to buy these types of properties, are they often people who kind of grew up in this realm, or are you working with quite a few people who are buying their first, equestrian property?
Um, I would say that's probably a mixed bag. And I would probably say most of them are buying their first equestrian property, even if they did grow up in it. Some people grew up in it with aspects of their parents didn't actually have a horse property, but they had them in lessons, or they had rode somewhere before. And now that they're an adult and they have a career and income, they're ready to buy a horse farm. Or as an adult, they got into riding and they kept it at a boarding facility, which, when you start doing the math on all that, if you have more than one horse, it financially doesn't make sense to continue to board your horse when you could be putting it into equity into a property. But for the most part, I would say a lot of them are first time farm buyers, and they're not always horse people. So a lot of times people come to me because I do specialize in farms, and they come to me because they're looking to create a homestead, or just have a property on land, which has been a huge thing. And they understand that I understand land for not only horses but livestock and growing crop and this different types of soil that you're going to need, and what would make a good farm for, let's say, like somebody who's going to homestead versus somebody who's going to run cattle or have horses. And I can walk people through that and help them to understand that. And that I do see a lot of an influx, especially in Tennessee, because we don't have a state income tax. And there's a lot of things that draw people here, especially that want to get out of like a city area and come to Tennessee and maybe start homesteading a little, living a little bit more off the land.
What do you think are kind of the most important things that these first time farm buyers need to know about suddenly taking on, this type of property?
What they can manage. So, sometimes people come to me and they're like, I want as much land as possible, and they have never even operated a tractor. And just kind of explaining to them the size, how long it's going to take you to maintain it, cut the grass, what's good. And then the next thing, what they plan to do on the land is very important, because not all land is equal to what somebody would need it for. So if somebody's looking to homestead and grow crop, but they're just growing crop for themselves, it's important that we're looking at land that gets enough sunlight, that's not always in the shade, that the soils aren't always wet, or that the soils aren't always clay or rocky. And when you're looking in the South here, you can get very, very different ground. From West Tennessee, you're going to have a very sandy ground. There's like absolutely no rock. And then when you start going more towards Middle Tennessee, you're going to get a lot more rock. And when you get to East Tennessee, you're going to get red clay, and you're going to get a lot of shale because of the mountains. And so it just depends on what somebody is looking for. But for my people who are just getting into farms, I kind of dissect, what are you planning on doing with the farm? Because something with a massive hill may work for somebody, but may not work for somebody else that's looking to have show horses. So again, it's not all equal. Like if somebody came to me and they're like, well, I'm going to have horses, I'll start dissecting, what type of horses are you doing? Do you have show horses? Do you have just hang out in the backyard horses? Do you have trail horses? And then however they answer that, we can kind of determine which part of the state, even, or even if they know what part of the state, but which part of the area works best for them that has the trail riding events or that's closer to the horse shows or getting on the interstate for horse shows. All that stuff is really important to know because there are different parts which seem like they're more affordable and different parts that seem like they're more expensive, but there's usually reasons behind that between the type of land, how the land rolls, the soil, all those things. So I understand all that. I've lived here for a very long time. And so I can help steer those people where they need to go depending on why they're buying the property.
Then kind of in that vein, because there are all these additional parameters to purchasing, a farm property, are there kind of additional parameters in an inspection that need to be considered as well?
Very much. Your typical inspector is only inspecting the house. So it's really up to a person to make sure that they're hiring an inspector to inspect the barn and then have realistic expectations as to what that's going to look like. So if they're buying a property that has a barn that's on a foundation versus a barn that's a pole barn, those are two very different types of barns. So you can't expect the same results from an inspection or the same price of a pole barn versus a barn that's on a foundation. And then also like the termite inspections are also very important. It's not unusual to find, actually, it's probably more usual to find termites at a barn if they're not doing the treatments and everything like that. So they're very different inspections that need to be done. And then fencing, nobody's inspecting fencing. Like an inspector's not typically inspecting fencing. So that's stuff that you're going to have to tell them, I want you to inspect this, or they need to make sure that they're inspecting it and making sure like the poles aren't rotting from underneath because the ground might be super wet.
When you are meeting with clients for the first time, are most of your clients looking at you for this specialty, or are you finding you're also getting a mix of your common residential clients as well?
I definitely have a mix. So yes, I have a specialty of horse farms. I definitely understand it, but within buying a horse farm, you have your typical residential property. So I understand residential properties very well within subdivisions because that is the basis of what it takes. And then that part is in a horse farm. So, it's like if you were saying the alphabet like A, B, C, A is going to be your residential property. B is probably going to be the land. And then the farm is going to be how you put that together with that residential property, with the land, with the outbuildings, like the barns, the cupboards, whatever else is there. But yes, we have agents that are in our brokerage that don't sell horse farms. All they do is specifically residential properties. But we also have agents in our brokerage that specialize in investment properties that are short-term rental properties, like in the Gatlinburg area. We have an agent over there that understands how to read those numbers, how to work with her investors in multi-million-dollar cabins. And the same thing in Georgia. We have agents in the Georgia area that specialize in the Georgia mountains and then Alabama, and those are different types of properties. The same with lake homes. If you know about Tennessee, you know that we have a ton of great lake properties here. We have agents that really specialize in lake properties, stuff like that. We have agents that specialize in working with developers in subdivisions with new construction. And that's all that they do is brand new construction with developers in subdivisions.
Kelly, could you share with us one of your most rewarding transactions, or one that was particularly challenging that you learned something from?
Oh, there are so many. There are so many. So, gosh, I would say probably one of my most rewarding ones. It was a few years ago, and it was in Georgia. There was this sweet, sweet little family that was relocating in Georgia, and they had bought their first farm, and they were so excited about it. They had a little girl. They have a little girl, and they had just moved out of their property. Everything was in a moving truck, and it was very important to them that it was a simultaneous closing because they didn't want to be, in a homeless situation per se that we kind of all joke about. But and the wife was pregnant and she wasn't due for another 3 months. Well, in the transition from coming to southern Georgia to northern Georgia, she went into premature labor. And it was very chaotic. And the husband ended up being able to get a POA so that he could get to the closing table and sign for her. And on the way to the closing table, she had just delivered her baby, which was ended up in the NICU. And they were both fighting for their lives at this point. And he was on his way, and we get to the closing table, and the sellers had never informed anybody that they had a second loan on the property. So he didn't have enough money to clear it, to be able to clear everything. And so these people essentially would have never closed on their property. So myself and the other agent, and it was, I think, a $30,000 loan that he needed to have paid off. So we paid it off for him so that the buyers would not be homeless. So I would say that was probably my most memorable one, because it was just one of those bad situations where I don't know if he was being honest about it, but that didn't matter. What mattered was my client was fighting for her life and her daughter's life, and they were not going to get a house if we didn't do something right then and there at the closing table. So we took care of that for them. And that family, they made it through that, and they're still in that house and they're loving it. So they love their little farmhouse.
Wow, that is an incredible story. Oh, I'm so glad they're okay, and I'm so glad they love their home.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. We still follow each other on social media and stuff like that. So I would probably say that is, the most memorable story that I have of work. But there are so many. There's so many good stories. I mean, being part of people's lives in these transitions, and a lot of time it's a big transition. Like, there was a professor that I worked with, and she was out of Canada. I want to say maybe Vancouver. So they've always lived in a very city like lifestyle. And she came to me and she was like, "We really want a homestead. My husband wants to be a stay-at-home dad and raise our boys and really grow farms and grow crop and animals and all that kind of stuff, live off our own food." And so we worked to find a property, and they got it. We sold their property that was in a subdivision, and ended up creating an entire YouTube channel and social media stuff. And then they sold that farm and upgraded to another farm that was larger for more animals, and they just changed their whole life around, and they love it. So there's so many good life-changing stories that I've been a part of.
Yeah. Oh, and I love hearing them because that's what, you all do as brokers and real estate agents is you are helping people make big changes in their lives, and it's so beautiful.
Yes, I love it. That's probably my favorite part, is because you open up a box for somebody that didn't think that they could get there, and then they're getting there. Or even in situations like I've helped, there was this one guy who was a veteran, and he was not able to make his mortgage payments. And he came up on my radar. So I reached out to him, and he tried to ignore me, Finally, got him on the phone. I'm like, "Listen, I can help you out of your situation. Like, you do not have to ignore this. I can get you out of this situation." He goes, "No, you don't understand. My floors have been flooded. They're ruined. The toilet overflowed. I won't be able to sell this house. I haven't made a payment on it in a year. I'm just going to let it go under." I'm like, "Let me come take a look at it. Let me see what's going on." And I went in there, and again, this was just a normal subdivision house. Went in there and took a look at it. He had insurance on the house, because when you have a VA loan on the house, they still pay for the insurance even when you're not making the mortgage payments. So I told him to reach out to his bank and ask them if I could do a short sale on his property, and also make the insurance claim to go ahead and get those floors repaired from the toilet that had overflowed. And the insurance covered it, got new floors in there, repainted the inside of the house, ran the numbers. And I'm like, "You only owe 360 on your house. I can sell your house for over 400,000. Let's go. And I did. And right away. And that guy ended up not having to have a foreclosure, ended up paying off his loan and walking away with $40,000. He was ecstatic when he rode off on his Harley. And it was just a really sad situation because he had gone through a divorce. He thought he was drowning and he thought he couldn't get out. And I was able to step in and help him. And I mean, that was just something that was a completely different story, but it was life changing for him. And he was so happy to be able to go on to the next chapter of his life and be done with this.
I think that's a great story because so many people, whether it's in finances or other things, you feel like you're in so deep you can't get out. And I love that you were able to kind of reach out a hand and be like, take my hand. I can help you out of this. And you saved his credit.
Yes.
Not only did he get out of this bad situation, but he didn't have to tank his credit. Oh, that's such a win.
Yes, yes. And there's just so many of those stories. I've been selling real estate for 15 years. So, I've touched thousands of people, and there's a lot of really good stories in there. We could probably talk for a very long time just about that.
Well, Kelly, what would you say is the biggest lesson you've learned in your 15 years in real estate?
Probably always referring back to our contracts, no matter what. We are not attorneys. We are not trained in law. We have preset contracts for a reason that are written by attorneys, and we fill in the blanks. Meaning, in the blanks are very important stuff like your earnest money, your time frames, and just really making sure you're operating within that. No matter how many times you've read the contract, to go back and like if you have something that might be going wrong or you need to get your client out of a situation, just going back and really referencing those lines within the contract are super important because sometimes we think we remember something some way and it actually is a little bit different when you reference it back. So I would say probably one of the biggest lessons is just making sure that you're always referring back to our contracts whenever you're making decisions or going to comment or advise anybody on anything.
And Kelly, what are some of the habits or routines you have that help keep you successful? You've been in this business for a long time. You've been, I'm sure you've pulled some of it from your restaurant, business managing 120 people. What are some of the things that help you stay successful?
There's a lot of things. So it's a lot of it is routine. A lot of it is the tools that I use. All of the tools that I use, I offer to my agents, and then I also coach them into how to successfully use them. But it starts with a powerful morning. So having a powerful morning routine, getting up. I have usually a really good book that I'm reading, and it's usually an inspirational book about somebody who's successfully done something. We listen to the Founders podcast a lot, which I don't know if you've heard of that, but there's always a book on there that they're reading about somebody who successfully has done something, from Henry Ford to Elon Musk, all the great people. So reading my book, having my coffee, really getting centered in my thoughts, going out, making sure doing my horse chores, working out, all that stuff gets done before I sit down and start working on real estate. But then when I sit down and start working on real estate, I have a set routine that I do. I have a CRM with lots of tools for texting and emailing, but I'm also making sure that I'm reaching out to my clients, at least 5 of them, past clients, present clients a day. And then going through all the files that need to be done and making sure that I'm ahead of where I need to be, not only for my personal production, but also for my agents' productions, because we typically have between 20 and 50 properties pending at all times. So just making sure that everything is staying where it needs to be on target and on track.
Curious with your routine, because I love a routine and I love a solid morning routine. Mine is pretty similar without the horse chores. But how strict are you with it? Because, right, real estate is an industry where suddenly people are reaching out to you, people are grabbing for your attention, like the world is grabbing for our attention all the time. I guess, how do you filter out some of that noise?
Strict with it. So being a broker in 4 different states and having agents underneath me, and then having my own personal production. I'm also a mom of 4 kids, and having horses. And if I don't say super routine and strict with where I need to be to fill up my cup, I can't pour into others. I'm drained, and I've definitely gone on the path of give, answer questions. Like I can start receiving text messages at 5 in the morning. And sometimes I'll answer back just to kind of be funny. Like I had an attorney text me on a Saturday at 5 in the morning. I texted him right back and he was like, I thought I was the only one working at 5 in the morning on a Saturday. I'm like, no, I'm pretty much working all the time, but I love what I do. So like for me, like if I go on vacation, um, like to a beach or something, it stresses me out because I love what I do. So I can only last like 3 or 4 days before I'm already I don't even last that long. I have to break open my laptop, go through my files. Like there's just certain things I have to check daily. But it stresses me out more not to do it. So as far as keeping on track and keeping on target, I've suffered so much by not staying on track and not staying on target of what my morning routine is that I don't allow anything to come in the way unless it's like an absolute emergency. But those are far and few in between. So I stay very much on target with how my routine needs to be so that I can be available and productive for everybody that needs me throughout the day.
That's great. And, I think the gift of a solid routine like you have is it takes away the decision making. You're not wasting any time making decisions. You're like, no, this is what I do and this is when I do it.
Mhm.
And like you said, only an extreme emergency is going to shake that boat.
And it helps keep everything organized and in order. With today's society where we text each other and we just want instant responses and think it can be, instantaneous, I realize that I can put it in a box and be like, okay, I'm not texting anybody back right now. Like, I will sit down and go through my text messages and everybody will get text back at that point because otherwise I'd never look up from my phone. Like, I would be always texting people back and then I wouldn't be doing what I should be doing for maybe somebody else. So I treat the text messages very similar to an email where it's, I'm going to respond again, unless it's an emergency situation. I'm going to respond when it's time for me to go through and respond to
I
everybody.
think that's a great way to view it. I think just because we can get to people so immediately doesn't mean that we're necessarily owed their immediate attention.
Yes.
Um, and I think that's something as a society we're getting better at, but I still think
Yeah.
we're learning.
We are still learning, but it's definitely getting better. I know even for me, it was a time where I would text somebody and be like, oh my gosh, it's been 5 minutes and they haven't texted me back. They're ignoring me. Now I text people and they don't respond for maybe a few hours. I'm like totally fine with that. I respect that because it doesn't just because you text somebody doesn't mean you should be able to just interrupt exactly what they're doing at that moment and demand their attention. I look at it more like if somebody's having a conversation with somebody, you wouldn't just jump in and be like, hi, I need you right now. Don't worry about what you're doing with them. So, I feel like I owe the person I'm working with respect at that time, and not answering the text message, but working with whoever, even if it's just on a file or an email or whatever it might be.
Yeah, I think that's a great view to have. Kelly, are there any challenges, you or your team are facing in the current real estate market, and how are you all working to overcome them?
Um, you know what? Yes, I would say there are definitely challenges in this market right now. I kind of hesitate to say that it's slower, but it is definitely slower. However, we've done more volume than we did the year before, more transactions, but that's because we are grabbing more of the market share. It doesn't mean that there is more that's happening like it was a few years ago. We're just dominating it more. But what's happening is like our higher price point stuff. Like I've got stuff that's over, 5 million, 10 million, that we don't have a ton of activity happening, but then the activity that we do get on it is extremely serious. Usually it's okay, I'm writing an offer, or I'm getting ready to write an offer, where maybe before we'd have 20 different showings and then an offer. Now it's more like it's almost one and one. You show, you get the offer. Because it's the people that are out there that are very serious. The people that are more on the, well, it would be nice to do that, usually are waiting until after an election year. It's very typical in an election year. You see about a 15% dip. So although it may seem like it's a little bit slower than it has been in the past, I don't think that it necessarily is slower, in the larger scale of things, because it's an election year, and typically speaking, it always has a little bit of a dip. And then we're expected that we're going to see a huge influx in January.
Oh, wow. And that's so interesting you point out that, especially with these luxury properties, if people are seeing it and then, going for it, that's a real testament to not only the quality of your marketing, but the importance of anybody's marketing. You
Mhm.
know, people are seeing, right, the house they're going to buy for the first time online. Really, no one's just blind showing up to a house anymore. Right? We're looking at the pictures, we're looking at the tour, the video, all of that marketing.
Yeah. And we do that a lot. Even that, I just sold a house to a sweet couple from California, and they were in town. We were looking at houses all around the Nashville area, and we didn't find anything that they liked. So they flew back to California, and then the next day, a house came on that they absolutely loved. So we went and took a look at it, not actually physically, because they're in California, and they ended up purchasing that and then closing on it last week. And when they drove here with their U-Haul was the first time that they saw it, and they absolutely love it. So we do get a lot of that, where people are buying just based off of our videos and our pictures.
I don't know if I could ever do that. I've said that before. I don't think I could buy something without, you know, being in it, but people do it and they're happy, and all the power to them.
They do it all the time. I mean, people, like, sometimes my sellers will be like, is this legit? Can they really? I'm like, they do it all the time. Because a lot of times, if they're looking for a specific property, it's not like those types of properties come up. Like if you were looking in a specific subdivision, you'd be like, oh, I'll just wait till the next one comes up, or just wait till it. Like, when people are looking for specific properties and they know what they want, it's really easy for them to pull the trigger, because they know it's not going to be perfect, but it's the best option that they have had. So they pull the trigger, and then they make it perfect for them.
Kelly, now that we are going into the last part of the year, Q4, what are you focusing on your team, and what are the goals you're focusing on with them?
So we're really focusing on 2025. The biggest thing about going into Q4, which means that it's time to rev up for Q1 of 2025. So one of the biggest things we look at right now is setting goals for 2025, getting the business plan set up, and then figuring out, like, for example, how many transactions you would like to do for 2025, and then making sure that you're taking 10% of that and making that your goal for the beginning of January, and making sure that if that is, like, if you're going to have a 400, if you want to do 400 transactions, like 400 home sales for next year, you want to take 10% of that, make sure you have 40 houses pending by the end of January, so that you can line up your goals. And that's all stuff that we go over with our agents, and we set for ourselves, and then make sure that they have their business plans lined out, so that they don't get lost in the holiday season. And we create contests and make sure that everybody's getting close to their goals for 2024. If they're not there, what do they need to do? How many phone calls do they need to make to rev that up, to make sure that they're hitting their 2024 goals? And then we like to have our agents write a letter to themselves that is dated for the end of 2025. That would be like, Dear Kelly, this year was so amazing. We got to travel to Paris, and we competed at Congress, and we hit our goal of 400 houses in, 100 million in sales. And so they write this letter to themselves, and then they'll read it at the end of that year. So we get ready and start doing all those things with our agents who want to participate in it. Some agents, they're like, I'm just going to sell to my friends and family, which is totally fine too. But for the agents that want to grow and, have multi-million-dollar production years, we really like to work with them to set that stuff up so that they can be successful.
I love the letter to your future self idea. I
I
might
know.
just do that for me.
I know, right? It's like, because you don't want to let yourself down, right? And like the first time I did that, like I had always wanted to like travel internationally. And then it was actually when COVID had hit, and I had wrote this letter to myself that we were gonna be traveling to France. And at the time we were in Nice, and we had a trip planned for that first week of March. And we were like, should we go? Because COVID was just becoming a thing. And I'm like, but I wrote this letter to myself. I have to go. So we went, and then the president shut down the country, and we were in France, and we literally got an emergency flight back at the very end of our trip, and we arrived at like 11:59 on that Friday, and Saturday it was closed to all international flights. So it was crazy, but the point is because I had this letter that I had wrote to myself. I really wanted to make sure I hit my goals so that I didn't let myself down and be instead of, I kind of say, well, I want to do this, I want to do that, and you get to the end of the year, you're like, well, I didn't get this done, but maybe next year. It kind of sets it up so that you're like, no, I have to. I don't want to let myself down.
Yeah, and it gives you a why am I doing this? Well, why? Because I promised it to myself, right? And yeah, probably having it written down makes it a little more serious. It makes you a little more accountable to yourself.
100%, 100%. Yep.
Well, I think we should all do that for 2025. Everybody listening, I'll do it. I'll get everybody at Window Still to do it. They love stuff like that.
And then tag.
Kelly, yes. Oh, maybe we should all. Oh, do we do it really publicly? Do we put it in stories, or like a story would just be for 24 hours? Do we make it reels?
Yes.
Ooh, public accountability. I love it. Thank you so much for joining me today. Would you like to tell everyone how they can work with you, how they can find you?
Absolutely. So you can go to my website, which is homeandfarms.com. I'm also on Facebook and Instagram. So it is Kelly Martin Home and Farms on Instagram. And then on Facebook, it's Kelly Martin, and it's also Home and Farms search for our business page too. And then I'm also on TikTok. So I don't remember what my handle is. I think it's Kelly Martin Home and Farms, but you can find me. I pop right up. So those are the 3 areas that I am on social media. And if anybody has any questions about joining our brokerage as an agent, or would like to work with one of us in buying or selling a house, a farm, a lake house, we would love to connect with any of your listeners.
Awesome. And we'll put all your links in the show notes so that people can find you with just a click. Kelly, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me on your show. I absolutely loved it.
Thank you for listening to the Closing Table podcast, brought to you by Window Still. I'm Kat Schooler. Please be sure you're following our podcast on Apple or Spotify. And if you're part of our YouTube audience, make sure you hit that subscribe button. If you're enjoying our podcast, please consider leaving us a comment or review. It helps us find more amazing listeners like you. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.